Welcome! We are streaming live from a Motel 6 room because my office is being fumigated. We will be back after a short break. Please enjoy the finest tuning of great modern day music. Welcome to the Gilfore podcast. Today we will be talking about the great bard, Willie Shakespeare. Bard! The topic for discussion will be surrounding the tragic tale of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. We will be referencing the tragic play, Antony and Cleopatra, written by the late William Shakespeare. I am your host, the Duke of Europe, Gilfore. No need to fret, we have another voice to speak. Allow me to present my special guest. He calls himself a Shakespeare expert, Professor Ross Porter.
Thank you, Gilfore.
As you should, Professor. Welcome to the Bard podcast.
I'm very excited
Bard! You were saying?
Well, I'm excited to be here. I would like to start this discussion off with a word about the great Mark Antony. Great ruler he was, and as portrayed in the play, he went slightly mad after his terrible loss to Octavian.
I guess he couldn't handle the heat.
It was more like a lack of forces, Gilfore.
Well, you're very boring, Professor. But anywho, let's begin talking about today's real discussion. Could Antony and Cleopatra have been written today and still have an impact like it did 50 or something years ago whenever the great bard wrote it?
It was more like 400 years ago, but regardless, I find it a work of genius how Shakespeare was able to bring to life such contrasting cultural settings. The play's Rome, on the one hand, is a predominantly male social order, encouraging individual discipline, valor, and devotion to the state. Egypt, on the other hand, is a looser society valuing sensual and emotional pleasure. The leads in this play are Antony and Cleopatra.
You don't say!
I do say! Having Antony, the strong male figure, to represent Rome, and Cleopatra, the strong woman figure, to represent Egypt. The most of Shakespeare's cultural impact relied on the teaching of such figures, ones that lived before the Common Era. He explores and gives insight into human nature, culture, betrayal, jealousy, and in this instance, not quite awe. The tale bestows upon us a rather tragic conclusion, for that I will not give away.
They die! I'm sorry, but if you haven't gotten around to it in its alleged 400 years of existence, you will not get around to it anytime soon. Sorry, not sorry.
Antony gives advice to be a child all the time. This refers directly to how it's difficult to represent ancient historic tales in a constantly changing world.
Yet the great bard did it, Professor.
Yes, I suppose he did, and he did a fantastic job. However, that was a product of its time. Those conquests and tense relations were still very relevant in those days. I'd even argue they're still relevant today. The big contention is a rapidly advancing technology. We live in a very different world now, Gilfore.
So you're saying it couldn't be written today and have the same impact?
Well, I hate to spoil your appetite, Gilfore, but no, it would not have the same impact. The same way a story written now would not have the same impact if it were written 400 years ago. Do you see? No matter what story is told in any period of time, its contents will have very different meanings. Would Antony and Cleopatra have an impact on today's world? Well, looking at its themes and devices, I'd argue it would. However, it would be a very different impact than it had when Shakespeare wrote it.
Then why write them specifically when he did, I wonder? So long after the fact.
He clearly saw absolute beauty in the telling of such great stories to give such simplistic messages, and while they may be simplistic, they are very important.
I think the great bard was clearly the wisest man ever. Besides myself, of course.
Well, you'd have to be either wise or insane to constantly write in iambic pentameter.
I'm not quite sure what that is, but it sounds like a mathematical term.
It's not. And while Shakespeare was a mastermind with the quill, and in turn became a great teacher, his premier goal was to entertain.
Kind of like myself, wouldn't you say?
No!
Don't disrespect me on my own podcast. I am the one who disrespects. Go on and fetch me a glass of water.
I am the guest. Surely.
Did I stutter, Professor? Now that he's gone for a moment, I'd like to tell my avid viewers that I have a little trick up my sleeve. We all want to know the burning question of whether or not Antony and Cleopatra could be written today and still have a great impact, right? Well, let's just say we're going to find out.
Here is your water, Gilfore.
How very thoughtful of you, Professor. Now tell me, this tragic tale, centering around love and war,
Yes, I'd call it a legendary love story.
it drove them both to madness.
Love can do that to an unhealthy mind.
Well, I have my own unhealthy mind, Professor. Listen to this. I have rented this Motel 6 room out for the next 400 years, and I will lock myself inside of it and drive myself insane.
Are you sure you have already not lost your marbles, Gilfore? This sounds like a horrid idea.
That's not even the start, good Professor. In the closet right behind us, I have the body of the William Shakespeare. I want you to help me resurrect him.
What? This cannot be, Gilfore. His body was laid to rest in Holy Trinity Church in the United Kingdom.
Nothing a little elbow grease and a crowbar can't fix. When the bard is back on his own 2 feet, you, my dearest Professor, can leave. I will remain with Will S. for him to write my story. Then we will see if it can stay relevant for 400 years.
This is preposterous. I will not. I cannot.
You're already here, so you might as well try.
Okay, fine. Oh my goodness! I actually did it! Sir, are you the William Shakespeare?
I told you, buddy o' mine. Now scram! Bill and I have a play to write.
But wait, I have to ask him a few
Now
questions.
scram! Now, where were we, Bard?